What's up, Vault Hunters? I'm Sh55, and this is a special edition of Ultimate Vault Hunters. It's been a while since we featured Flak on Ultimate Vault Hunters, but that's not to say everyone's favorite sentient murder bot has fallen out of favor in Borderlands 3 Endgame. Quite the contrary, says content creation team member Triple G, who is joining the program once again to showcase a build created with the newly announced 4th skill tree in mind. Will his new build, Gravity Flak, attract our attention, or will we slingshot it back out into space? Let's find out. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and joining the conversation. Whether you're joining us on Twitch, YouTube, or Twitter, or listening along on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Spotify, we thank you for tuning in and listening to the program. Our next episode is airing at our usual time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific, on the official Borderlands Twitch and YouTube. Triple G, how's it going? How you been?
Yeah, I'm really good. You?
I'm great. You've been enjoying Bloody Harvest?
Yeah, it's been really good. I'm excited to jump back in and get some new builds.
Oh, that's great. Are you gonna make builds for all your characters?
Yeah, that's the plan. We're going to probably do one build for each Vault Hunter, so time permitted.
That's a lot. I mean, at least you have a little bit of time left to complete all those builds. That's going to be exciting. Yeah. I'll be looking forward to your builds on your YouTube.
We'll see.
Yeah. Well, cool. Let's go ahead and dive into the build. Let's talk about the thought process behind how you determined which points you wanted to take in this tree.
So this was really difficult. So one of the things that's really difficult about having 4 trees instead of 3 is there's probably something in each one of the trees that you want to take. So you need to actually make a conscious decision on what it is you want your build to do before you actually just start and kind of putting points around. So with the 3 trees, you can probably get everything you want, but with 4 trees, you definitely can't. And one of the really good things about Flak is that there are some absolute nuggets of skill points right towards the end of the trees. So if you want some of the really best skills, you've got to absolutely invest all the way down and grab all that damage and all that regen.
Just as a side note, like how many trees do you think you could? I haven't done the math for how many skill points go all the way to the end caps. Can you get 3, or is it only 2 at this point?
No, you can definitely only get 2. Okay. I think you get 2, and then you probably get maybe about 10 points spare.
Oh, that's not too bad. Well, at least you can invest into at least 3 trees.
Yeah.
Cool, yeah. I'm excited to see. So each tree has an overarching theme, be it action, skill, damage, or utility. Mm-hmm. What does the purple tree focus on?
So the purple tree is actually really exciting because the purple tree is probably the first tree that we've seen in Borderlands 3 is mainly focused around co-op. So the gravity snare itself doesn't actually do damage to enemies. It actually immobilizes enemies in 2 very different ways. So we can either just pick them up and stun the enemies, or we can actually turn the enemies to allies. And whilst there has been some Flak skills before that turned enemies to allies, this is on a completely new level. The gravity snare is huge. So you can just neutralize like 10 or 15 enemies at once if they're in a concentrated area. Is
this like something to like the phase lock on Amara, or because you said you can lift them up into the air and...
Yeah. So they get you put the action skill down and they will be lifted up into the air, and they kind of look like a phase lock bubble, but that will last maybe 1 or 2 seconds, and then they will drop down to the ground, have a brief stun kind of spell, and then it will go again and pick them up again after 2 or 3 seconds, and it will continue to do that for as long as the action skill is active.
Wow, interesting. Oh, cool. Okay, cool. Thank you for explaining that for me. I haven't played it yet, so... Yeah. I'll be excited to check it out. Okay, so why should a player invest points into the purple tree over the other existing trees?
So there are some really, really strong skills towards the bottom of the purple tree. Okay. So one of the things that Flak, kind of the common misconception with Flak was that he didn't have a lot of survivability.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that in Guardian rank he could get shield regen. Now this particular tree gives you shield regen left, right, and center. And as well as that, still gives you a little bit of damage, but synergizes so well with some of Flak's other skills. You can pretty much make him invincible as long as you keep firing. So he's really strong.
So similar to a Mo's build that you built before your GT40.
Yes, very similar. Whereas Mo's would focus on unlimited ammo and putting through DPS. That way, Flak focuses on doing critical hit damage from anything that he hits.
Interesting. Cool. Why should a player use Loaderbot as a pet over the other existing pets?
So there's a few things with the Loaderbot that he can do that none of the other pets can do. So the first thing is that he actually can throw a grenade, which, whilst that's cool because it can charge your pearl if you use a hex, so you can do continuous dot damage, so it can charge your pearl, consecutive hits, that kind of thing. You're actually going to get on grenade thrown, the probably the go-to anointment for all the stuff. So excuse me. So it's really, really powerful. And in addition to that, this particular augment that we'll get into in a while, he deals an incendiary shotgun, which does a significant amount of damage. Like this pet bangs, he really does. And the shotgun, because it's multi-pellet, can crit. And he has other synergies where when he crits, he gives us more damage. So it works really, really well. Probably better than the Scorcher pet, which is probably the go-to pet I would use for any other flat build.
So, question. I know this is a spoiler, but I know that we get the shield on the pet. Do we get an artifact? Does the artifact count for the pet as well?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. So you can give it, like, for example, a stopgap, and he will get immunity when he loses a shield. But other than that, I haven't seen any of the abilities. But it is very early days into the tree.
I was going to say, because like if you could get a pearl on your pet with the pellets, oh my God.
Yeah, it would be crazy.
That would be crazy. Okay, so of the existing trees, which other tree does the new one synergize best with?
So when I had a look at the trees, if you talk about the trees overall, you have the blue tree, which is all about gamma, pet damage, and a little bit of health regen. The green tree, which is all about health regen. And then the red tree, which is all about damage. Damage. Yeah, it's pretty much just damage and critical hit damage. So in order for us to still be able to hit enemies really, really hard, we need to have gone down that red tree to synergize with this one.
Oh, interesting. It's interesting you'd say that, because I would have thought the blue tree would, because you get a lot of health regen from the pet, and you share damage with your pet. Why not the blue tree?
So the blue tree is really good for when you're doing kind of splash damage and pet damage, but the pet really is going to be priming our damage through his critical hits, again, which we'll get into with the skills. And on my builds, I tend to only use the blue tree in synergy with the red tree when I'm using rack constantly. Like, as I said before, like if you've got this flak on a co-op build, you're going to love having this flak, because you could go into the Guardian Takedown and just chuck this down, and we're going to immobilize so many enemies. Your friends are going to have a great day.
That's awesome. So cool. A great character to play with friends. Interesting to make Flak a support character. I've always used him as a glass cannon.
Yes, so definitely.
I'm excited. Cool. All right. So walk me through this build. Where are we going to start?
So let's start with the new tree, because that's what everyone wants to see. Yeah. So in terms of the action skill, we covered that earlier. So the action skill itself, you'll deploy a trap down. It will pick enemies up and slam them to the ground. So it's just worth noting again that doesn't actually do damage to the enemy. So you're still going to actually need to do damage. So there are certain weapons and stuff that I will recommend. But in terms of the point distribution, so the first 5 points will be going into a skill called Gotta Go Fast. So Flak's pets gain increased movement speed and damage. So pet damage is essentially this first row. I tested Success Imminent, and unfortunately the Nova damage, although it had Mayhem scaling, wasn't enough for me to want to pick that skill. I would rather have the pet damage, because this pet is actually incredibly strong. Then I have 4 points in agility training, which gives us reload speed. Now, I wouldn't normally pick those, but I actually needed to get down the tree later on. So those were the best places for it. You could potentially put them into Nova just for a little bit of extra damage, because if we're using action skill start, we can make that Nova go off quite a lot. But I still thought reload speed was a little bit better. So it's just a personal favorite. So you could move those 4 points across into Success Imminent if you needed to.
Okay.
In terms of the second row, the first skill is Combat Veterinarian. So that will give us Lifesteal. Now, the Lifesteal's pretty good to have, although I will say that most of the time we won't we won't be giving us lifesteal ourselves. This is for the pet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Flak's pet will gain a portion of the damage dealt back as health. So we're primarily going to focus on shields. You'll probably see minimal to non-actual lifesteal across the build once we get down to the latest skill trees. And once you see the footage of yourself, you won't actually see much lifesteal there.
Okay.
So we'll put 1 point in there and then another 3 points into Throat Ripper. And what this will do is a hunter skill. So Flak's pet's attacks have a chance to score a critical hit. Now, this is a very, very important skill for the build. So there is a skill later on that will, every time our pet gets critical hit damage, it will give us a bonus of 70% damage topped off. So we want this critical hit chance high so that we can get extra damage later on.
Okay.
So really, really important skill. And better toys, we don't need this skill. I've tried it again. Later on down the tree, we will be getting shields back so fast that we just don't need this skill on this particular build. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Then in terms of the first augment that we would use, which is in line with this second row, we're going to use forage. So whenever an enemy is trapped by this gravity snare, they're going to drop ammo, health, and boosters and shields. This is actually really good. I found that you could keep yourself at max grenades with this. Now, that works really well if you were going to use something like the Pearl, because you can charge your consecutive hits on the Pearl and on your consecutive hits anointment. So I went for this on this particular build, but there's another augment that you could use if you wanted to do something else, but we'll get onto that in a little while.
Okay.
So the next up in terms of skill points, we're going to have 1 point into take this. So it's pretty easy. Our pet is going to have our shield. And that shield will give the pet the ability similar to Zane's clone. So we have a stopgap. So whenever our pet... No. So Zane's clone can take the ability in his skill trees. This Flak now has the same ability as well.
Oh, that's what you're saying. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so when you say the pet gains a copy of Flak's shield, they now have a transformer.
Or a stopgap in this case.
They now have... Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it makes the pet really, really survivable. Like I don't think I've had my pet die. And so if he does die, which it probably will happen at some points, so I think he got really close to dying in True Guardian Takedown. The next point that we're going to have is Lethal Force Authorized. And this is a cool point. This is just for coolness. So when the loader bot would go into fight for life, it actually just turns into an exploder like we've seen in Borderlands 2 and just runs off and blows up. So, nice. And the damage of that is pretty substantial. So it's pretty good. So
is that something that would happen frequently considering all the shields and health regen and everything?
So on this build, when I wasn't in the Guardian Takedown, the pet didn't go too much. So this is like I said, it's a cool skill. I just think it sounds cool. So I've put a point there. You could redistribute that point if you wanted to, but that's the one I went. It just sounds cool. And who doesn't want a Borderlands 2 loader bot, right? So, and then to complete that row, the second augment that we're going to pick up is Wide Net. And this one is really simple and really self-explanatory. We're going to get increased duration and increased radius on our action skill. And the radius is the one that I really like. Duration, this skill feels like it lasts forever anyway, but the radius means that you can crowd control just vast areas. So if you think of the map on Athenas, you can go pretty much the width of the map on Athenas in terms of the radius. Wow. So it's huge.
So wait, you can pick up more than one enemy at a time?
Yeah. So I think I've seen 6 at least be picked up, but I think it could be more. I'd have to test it, but it's you just immobilize. So I did a Malawan takedown and I threw the snare in the middle, and when those groups spawned, they all just got picked up and it just immobilizes everyone. That's why this skill is just so good for co-op play. So you can have a co-op player doing the damage to the bosses and you can protect them. They can be a true glass cannon because no one's going to hit them while this is going. And then, so onto the next row, which is the fourth row down. So 5 points into Monkey Do. Now, this is a critical skill for this build and a critical skill for this tree. So what this does is that Flak's pet gains increased critical hit damage. But on top of that, whenever Flak's pet scores a critical hit, we as flak will deal, the next shot deals bonus damage based on the weapon damage. So we get 70% on whatever weapon damage we use. So if it's a big, powerful bullet, like a sniper, 70% weapon damage on that. But that, and also I tested this on the light show, which has a spread of, I don't know, about 8 or 9 pellets. All of those pellets are amped. So it's really, really good. So to synergize with that, Flax has 3 options as pets, and we'll pause here to go through them. So his normal pet, who is armed with a shock sniper rifle and has homing orbs. And if you shoot those orbs, you get a Nova. Now, the fire rate on the sniper rifle is not high enough for us to crit often enough for us to get this damage of 70% often enough. So for this particular build, not that pet, not the pet iron loader. The second option was the bull loader. Now this gets rid of the sniper rifle and gets a shotgun. Mm-hmm. And now a shotgun obviously can critical hit on all the pellets, which is really good. And this pet gives you the roundhouse melee attack, which can proc Groundbreaker. So it's a good option. That is a good option. But the option that I went with was the Warloader. So this can do incendiary shotgun damage, so we keep our pellets, but it can also throw grenades, and quite frequently. So we're going to get on grenade thrown from the grenades, which is something that none of the other pets can do on flak. So we get on grenade thrown, which can throw a hex, which can charge our consecutive hits, as we said earlier. And then in addition to that, we get increased fire rate, which is really, really good.
On top
and then
of your agility training.
Yeah, on top of everything.
Oh, that's reload speed. Sorry, yeah, fire rate. Okay.
Yes, and come on.
No, I was just going to ask, with the incendiary shotgun, so is your elemental damage going to be important for your pet? Does that count for your pet?
So it will count for the pet. So there's not a lot of elemental damage on flak, really.
Right. Which is weird that you have an incendiary shotgun.
Yes, but with the new terror anoints that have just come out, there is a specific terror anoint that's come out, which gives Flak's pet damage a bonus 200% damage. That's incendiary for consuming terror. So at the moment, if you can get that anointment on a gun, every time you issue an attack command, you're going to consume your terror and you're going to buff your pet beyond belief. And this pet already bangs. So expect to see some kind of pet builds around this particular warloader and terror as well. So I definitely expect to see something around that.
Maybe on your YouTube channel.
Maybe. And then, so the final 2 points on that row is not even a challenge. So whenever Flak's pet kills an enemy, Flak gains increased action skill duration and action skill cooldown rate. Now, as I said before, it lasts a long time already. So I tested this with 5 points. I'd brought it back down to 2. I don't feel the benefit of 5 points because it just all the mobs already dead and it's still going. And a really important thing to know actually here is you can pick the actual trap up and give your cooldown back. So when you're going through mobs, you'll get it back a little bit faster. Unfortunately, I would have liked to have seen it where I could just press a button, but you actually have to go back to it, but that's okay. So you go back to it, pick it up, and then you can move it on to the next mob. But 2 points is more than enough. You honestly, you don't need any more because we have already picked up wide net, which gives you duration of 25% already. So the synergies there, it's more than enough. You don't need any more than that. And then onto the penultimate row, and this is the best skill on flak by a mile.
Really?
I'm putting it out there. My name's on the. I'm putting it out there.
Okay.
Fuzzy math. Whenever flak or their pet scores a critical hit, a portion of flak's and their pet shields are restored.
Wow, that's huge.
It's massive. So bearing in mind, we've already buffed the amount of critical hit damage and critical hit chance on our pet. And everybody that knows flak knows that in the orange tree, there is a certain skill called Megavore, which will allow you to do critical hit damage on anything that you hit in any part of the body. And that's a 20% chance. So any fast firing weapons on this, you will just see your shield just constantly go up all the time.
Finally.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So if you are another Vault Hunter and you're used to seeing where you shoot bullets on Zane and you just have your health go to full, or on Amara, health go to full, Flat can do this with his shields now. It's the same way that Mose can do it with her shields with like a Bloodletter build.
We've been needing this, man. It's time. Yeah.
So I tested how many points you need in this. I think 4's the right number.
Okay.
As of right now, where our lovely enemies are still doing M10 damage, if that is addressed and then don't do M10 damage, you can take some points out here if you want to. But the actual 4 points in right now is where you need to go.
Okay.
Now, I said that this fuzzy math was the best skill.
You did. You put your name on it.
However, this is like the very close second. So I can't say this, so let's try it. So capacitance, right? We'll go for that.
You did it. Yeah, that's it.
Amazing. Whenever Flak activates their action skill, they gain a greatly increased shield. Forget what I just said. They double their shield. He doubles his shield for 100% for 16 seconds. 16 seconds. And if you're Flak, in 16 seconds, everything's dead. Everything around you is dead.
So double what you already have. You're not talking shield regen. This is like
double.
Okay.
So for example, Transformer has a roughly 40k. You're going to get 80k. Now, if you wanted to, you could put a Deathless on to double your shield already. You could be at 80k and then double it again with this action skill to be 160k. So Flat now has the ability to get huge amounts of shield. And then when you think about the fact that he crits and regens his shield all the time, he now has serious survivability. Man, I used to use a protuberance and shoot at my feet with a transformer just to keep myself alive in the takedown. I'm so excited. There's some survivability now. This is great. And because Flak can get his shield back so quickly, there's something really special that you can now do with amp shields, but we'll get onto that in the gear.
All right. I'm excited. All right, what tree are we going to go to next?
So we're going to go to the orange tree next. Okay. So no surprises in this tree. If you look at many of the builds in the Borderlands community, you're going to get this kind of setup in an orange tree. However, the difference is where we talked about the purple tree and we talked about co-op. If you want to play as a solo player and you spec in this way, when we change a couple of pieces of gear, you're going to be able to do billions of damage on it's just incredible. You're going to be able to boss kill solo. Like Amara Billions, yeah. Like Amara Billions. It's going to be incredible. So let's go through them. Like I said, this is going to be something that most people are familiar with. So 5 points into an Interplanetary Stalker, which is a kill skill, which gives us 16% damage per stack. Then we're going to have Leave No Trace for full 3 points here. This is really good. Those of the people that are fans of the Reflux will know that you actually can't run out of ammo if you use a Reflux with this skill. The magazine just doesn't go down, which is really good. Then we're going to put 5 points in Hunter's Eye for that critical hit damage against humans, armor damage against robots, and damage reduction against beasts. A fixed head count for those of people that play Flak now. That head count is now fixed. So every time we get a critical hit, we are going to reduce our action skill, which even though this is in the orange tree, this will pull Gravity Snare back faster as well. So Gravity Snare, I think, let me just double check, but I think it's like a 30-second cooldown. Yeah, 36 seconds. But with head count and the other skills that we've taken on action skill cooldown, we're going to get that back way faster than that. Then that's it for the first two rows. We're not going to put any points into Ambush Predator, although there will probably be some points when we use certain class mods in there. Then we're going to put no points into Two Fang.
And nothing into Second Intention? The one in the top right?
Yes, sorry, no. No points into Second Intention either. We don't need the reloads because we've got it in the purple tree and we already have critical hit damage and everything like that already. Then 3 points into Big Game, obviously buffing our Hunter skill duration and effects, and 3 points into Most Dangerous Game, which is one of the most important skills in the tree. Every time we kill a badass, we're going to get constant buff damage for a certain period of time, and the amount of points in there just makes it to crazy numbers, which is really good. And then a point into Galactic Shadow to buff our critical hit damage, which is already buffed from the purple tree. 2 points into Grim Harvest. We only need 2 here. I experimented it. We've got more than enough damage to boss kill. So we only need 2 points in here. And then Megavore, obviously, which is the best skill on. Yeah. Well, now they're probably the second best skill after shield regen on hit. So when we are bossing, the augments we're going to use. So we're going to use rack for bossing. So
really?
So co-op play, we are going to use our purple tree and our snare to immobilize everyone for everybody else. But when we want to be selfish and we want to do boss kills ourselves, we're going to use the rack attack. We're going to use the augment for Falconer's Feast, which is going to give us a little bit of health back if we need to. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use rack accelerate, which is never used by anybody. But when I show you the class mod choices that we make and the equipment that we make, you will understand why. But we'll get into that when we use the actual gear itself.
Do you use a different pet as well, or do you stick with
the new pet, the Warloader, is always the one you're going to want to go for. Okay. The Scorcher was the go-to, but I think the new Warloader is just better for that on grenade thrown action.
Fantastic.
And then there's just a couple of points sprinkled in into the other trees. So for the green tree, we're going to put 1 point into Furious Attack just for stack damage, just so we have an extra hunter skill. You don't have to do this. It's just so you've got an extra hunter skill, because why not have more? And then no more points into the green tree. And then we are going to flick to the blue tree.
Okay.
So we have 9 points spare at this stage. So we're going to put 9 points in. So the first thing we're going to do is give our pet some more damage by having 5 points into Ferocity, which gives him another 50% damage, which is really good for the amount of points that we do. Then we talked about the extra damage. So we're going to increase his Flak's gun damage and action skill duration. So the reason why we didn't put as many points in the purple tree for duration is because we're going to put them here, because not only do we get duration, but we also get more gun damage if we use these skill points.
Right.
So we got 12% gun damage and 45% action skill duration. So action skill duration will have diminishing returns, but he will be up for, it feels like it's 2 minutes. I'd have to time it, but it feels like it's a long time. And then the final point is in Frenzy. Again, you can play around with this point if you want, but this is just another hunter skill. So to give us a different set of stacks, which is giving us a different set of damage for both the pet and Flak.
Now, okay, I want to ask, are you setting us up for like a Zane situation where you can just like set it and forget it? Like, are you just like set your pet onto somebody and then everything's dead? Or...
So I think if I was going to do an AFK kind of pet build, I would go more down the blue tree, because that has more benefits to pet damage, and I would reduce the amount of points into the orange tree. If we were going truly AFK, then I would probably do that. And I would probably go a little bit more down the green tree to get me the skill that gets the pet to revive us, lick the wounds, just for that little bit of protection. But having played with this for a couple of days, your pet does more than enough damage. You might be able to get away with some AFK in, but I'd definitely go down the blue tree a little bit more.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. We talked about the augments. Just to go over them again, what are the 2 augments that you take for co-op play? So the first one is Forage, which was the drop more ammo, give us more grenades, have fun with all of that kind of stuff. And the second one is Wide Net, which is action skill duration and action skill radius. Now, there's something really cool about this tree that has pluses and minuses. So let's go through them both. So if you take the augment as it is, Gravity Snare, it picks people up and it puts them down. So obviously we talked about it doesn't do damage. But if you've got certain enemy types that can jump, when they land on the ground, they have a couple of seconds where they can either shoot at you or they can jump. They can technically jump out of your radius. So I found at times that was a little annoying that they suddenly were out of my radius. The reflux, which was one of the weapons I used, would still kill everybody around them, which was really good. So I tried the other skill, which is Blind with Anger. So instead of picking people up and putting them down, what this will do was tell all those enemies that you now fight for me, you're now an ally. Now, normally, if you think about turning allies
turning enemies to allies, you wouldn't actually, it's not really beneficial. There's a couple of class mods out there, but they don't do a lot. But having 10 enemies around you not shooting at you is amazing. The only caveat to that is that if you have weapons that track, like the Plague Bearer, or that chain, like the Reflux, because they're allies, they won't chain. So you need to use weapons like the Light Show or other weapons that you have to manually fire. If you fire a Plague Bearer over the top, it's not going to hit anyone but the back wall.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You've done a lot of testing on this in a very short amount of time. I'm impressed. Okay, so that's for the co-op play. And then just to reiterate, for bossing specifically, we're going to go a rack build.
Yes. So we are going to go rack as just the normal, the rack attack to start with. Then we're going to go Faulkner's Feast, which is going to give us a little bit of health. Primarily it's for bossing, but it is always nice to get a max health for when you're traveling to that boss. And technically you could use this as a solo player and still do a ton of damage as well. And then Rackcelerate. So as we're going to go on to the gear next, let's start to talk about this. So the reason we choose Rackcelerate is because we're going to use the new class mod that came in DLC 4 called the Peregrine. Now, what the Peregrine does was that your first rack that hits an enemy actually drops a grenade. So we're going to be using a fish slap, which we'll talk on in a little bit about melee damage and how crazy damage it is. But it's only the first rack that drops the grenade. Okay. So if we think about other choices that we have rack open a cold one, which adds cryo damage. So we could do that, but we don't really need any kind of elemental damage. And the other one is flock and load, which sends forward 2 additional rack. So the choices are, I have 2 more additional rack, which can't carry the Peregrine because it's only the first one that actually hits it. So it's a kind of, whilst the rack do decent damage, they don't do as much as a grenade can do. Or we take the extra charge, which means that we get an extra grenade throw on the first rack. So it makes more sense to take an extra charge.
Okay. And why the fish slap?
So the fish slap is obviously a cartel weapon. So unfortunately you can't get it new now, but I'm sure if you did some trending forums, you'd be able to get one. But essentially the fish slap is a grenade that does melee damage. And it's the only grenade of its kind. And melee scaling gets full Mayhem 10 scaling. So you can do incredible amounts of damage with the fish slap. And in addition to that, it also procs Groundbreaker, which is a Guardian rank, which essentially gives you, it calculates all the damage that you did over the last 5 seconds and then gives you 25% of that. So Flat can do billions and millions of damage and then you get 25% of that. So, and you get that's free. It's completely free. So you might as well utilize it.
Wow. And that's a level 60 grenade even. I
think it's 57. I think it's 57.
Really? Yeah. 57? Oh, man. And it's still that good. Interesting. Okay.
It's very good.
Okay, cool. What would you say the main rotation of this build is for co-op play?
So for co-op, you're a crowd control person. So like I said before, your ability isn't going to do damage. So what you need to do is you can run in there. If you know where the enemies are going to be spawning, throw your trap down. You're immobilizing. So you've either set them as your allies or you've picked them up and slammed them down. So if you pick them up and slam them down, you can use a crowd control weapon like the Reflux and kill 2 or 3 enemies while your mate's there, killing 2 or 3 enemies at the same time. And then if you set them as allies, same thing. Once you set them as allies, it's so powerful because nobody's shooting at you. So you could I've danced an emote next to the enemies. Like they just don't shoot at you. So it's just great.
Fantastic. Okay. And what about for bossing?
So for bossing, then I'm sure we'll have some clips, but fire your rack and everyone dies. Really? Literally. So you can one-shot Tron literally just with 1 rack. So with the combination of gear, which we'll get to, but you literally will fire your rack and he will hit Tron and he will explode. And that's the end of it. And you can go and check your loot.
All right. Fantastic. What damage builds would you say exist out there that could compare to numbers in this build?
In terms of one shot, kind of what the the rack can do. If you remember the old days of firing like a couple of pistol shots in your first 2 shots of fadeaway, and then your third shot in fadeaway, which was the most charged shot, you would like hit him with an iron cannon. You're doing that kind of damage. The damage numbers that you will see consistently from Tron when set up correctly with the right gear that we've got here, you will hit the first shot, which is your flak, will hit 200 million. Then you'll get an ASC, which will hit 800 million. And then you'll get another number, which is probably another rack, which is hitting for another 100 million. So things will just die. The only things that will survive are things with immunity phases.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, so while we have you here, how did this build fare overall with a True Guardian Takedown?
So True Guardian Takedown, you'll be pleased to know that whilst I soloed it, I actually used the purple tree on the crystals. So you can put the snare in front of the crystals and then go make a cup of tea, because those guys aren't going to come near you. So the only thing technically you need to do is just move the trap to the next crystal. But if you put your snare in front of the crystals, they'll walk in and become an ally. And then that's it. And then on to the next one.
Okay. So what about Anathema?
So for Anathema, I would actually switch to the rack. So the gravity snare is not going to give you much, because there's you need to do actual damage. So if you use the rack setup, then just fire your rack once. That will get through one chunk of immunity, jump back and forward, and just repeat that. And pretty much every single time that you fire the rack, you will just chunk him to the next immunity phase.
Wow. That good, huh?
That good.
That's crazy. Okay, what about Scourge, the Invincible Martyr?
It's exactly the same as an really. I would actually use the rack all the way through that fight, because when you're getting teleported, you just want to clear it as fast as possible. So you can, for example, when you got the 2 teleport phases, so you can just put a gravity snare in front of the 2 portals that come either side in the first phase or in front on the second phase, and kill them that way. Or you could just use your rack and they will die as well.
What do you feel like this build excels at the most?
So it really does depend on the setup you go with. So it really does do millions and millions and millions of damage on the rack setup. But if you are an inexperienced Vault Hunter, you might be doing something for the first time, you don't really know what's going on, or Gearbox release some new content in the future, that gravity snare gives you time to take a breath, so you can kind of work out what's going on. So like I said, it feels like it lasts for nearly 2 minutes. So if you know the enemy's all coming from one way, you can put that down and you give yourself a breath, you can reload. Your teammate might be in fight for your life. You just shut that down, don't worry about them, and you can revive.
That's smart. It's good at mobbing for yourself, right? If you're just playing solo?
Yeah. So you, like I said, if you set it to the stun, you can use a reflux or something else that chains through enemies, like a brainstormer, and you can just go through. Alternatively, you can just fire a plague bearer over the top of them, and it will target all the enemies.
Fantastic. How do you feel about the 5 points recently added to the game alongside Psycho Krieg and the Fantastic Fustercluck?
So when we had 3 trees, it just made you feel like a god. On all builds, on all characters, because you could get to the bottom of everything and you could get the points you wanted to. As I alluded earlier on, now there's 4, you have to make conscious decisions again on what it is you are going to do. So the new DLC gave us great comms for this particular build, and then the 5 points have been given us. So if we were to take 5 points out of there, we would probably be taking them away from maybe a little bit of pet damage. So we wouldn't lose any damage ourselves, but we'd take that cool factor away from our pet maybe.
Do you feel this build stood to benefit greatly from having these 5 points?
So no, and the only reason I say that is because without 5 points, you can still get Megavore and that you can still get Fuzzy Math. And those are just 2 huge points synergies together.
All right, cool. Okay, so if you had 4 more points to add to your talent tree, where would they go?
So I think it's a tough decision because we don't really need any more pet damage at all. So most of the skills are pet damage. So I think what I'd probably do is I'd split them between Furious Attack and Frenzy. So both are kind of kill skill, hunter skills that will give us just more damage per stack. So I think just more damage when we're actually firing a gun would be better than more pet damage, because we're already buffing our pet beyond belief.
All right, cool. All right, so let's get into weapons and gear. What would you be using? What weapons and gear will be using for this build?
Okay, so let's start off with the boss killing stuff because that's really, really, really easy.
Okay, this is for the rack attack build.
This is for the rack attack build. So you're in the orange tree, you've got your orange augments. So essentially what's going to happen here is we are going to fire our rack. So our rack and the fish slap and all the damage will get whatever anointment we have on our gun. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a face puncher with 300% over 90. So that will give us 300% on anyone we hit first. Now, 300% with the rack and the fish slap means dead. Just means dead. Okay. So any mob, no mob's going to stand next to you and actually take it. What 300 and over 90 does is something truly wonderful and mysterious with the white elephant artifact. So we'll do the white elephant in detail, but it basically double dips into Mayhem scaling, which is giving us the 800 million damage. So it's classed as a grenade, the white elephant. So the white elephant on melee attaches a sticky bomb, which is classed as a grenade. Now, our fish slap's classed as melee. So we are going to attach a grenade, which is delivered by our rack. That grenade, it potentially attaches a sticky bomb, which is a grenade, which is melee, which gets groundbreaker, which gets mayhem scaling, which then double dips into white elephant, which means death.
Nice.
So nice. It's really important to note that you don't have to use a face puncher here. Any gun with 300 over 90 will give you the double dipping into the white elephant. However, advantages of using the face puncher are it comes with melee damage on the card, so plus 60%, which is always nice. In addition to that, if you, let's say you hit Tront, okay, and you take his shield off with the rack, and then the white elephant kills the rest of him for 800 million. Whatever person you shoot for next in the next 5 seconds is going to get 25% of 800 million. They literally just go, and then the next person's dead. So if you get massive white elephant damage on anybody, the next person you shoot with a face puncher will die. That being said, if you use, for example, we will have a 300 over 90 Hellwalker, you've still got that damage. It will just be delivered in your next fish slap, for example.
Would it be to your advantage then to target an ad first and then target the boss, or
potentially? But it will depend on the ad, because your racks could kill them without even the fish slap. So you need to actually do damage. So if you picked like a badass heavyweight, the rack probably won't kill them in one, but the white elephant will. So the next person after that will die.
Okay. Cool.
So any weapon with 300 over 90, if you can't get over a hold of a 300 over 90 face puncher, the Lenoge will be really good, or the recently buffed Psycho Stabber, which has gone to 340% melee damage on the card, is going to do crazy things. So anything with melee damage, if it has a pointy bit on the front of its gun, it's going to do a little bit of melee damage. So anything like that's going to help.
Good to know.
And then if you actually want to fire your guns, then I would recommend consecutive hits. So a consecutive hits light show or a consecutive hits mono will work really well here, because we could use action skill end for 100% weapon damage, but that will only last for a certain amount of time. We could use next 2 mags, but again, that will only last for 2 magazines, and flak's not most, so we can't regen his ammo currently. So consecutive hits will go up to 200% when charged. Now, if you remember, we've still got a loader bot on, the war loader bot, which is firing grenades, which is on grenade thrown, which is charging our hex or whatever else grenade we might potentially be using. Even the fish slap will charge up to a certain extent. So it's why I would use consecutive hits. So as long as you've got something doing dot damage, consecutive hits up, so you can get up to 200% damage with consecutive hits.
Okay, so are you using a fish slap on your co-op build?
No, we're going to be using a different grenade on the co-op build. So in terms of the equipment, so we've gone through the guns on the rack attack, the fish rack build. Then we're going to use a stopgap for survivability on rack attack. So we've got 3 charges. Every single time we fire a charge, we are going to be immune for 5 seconds because of action skill start anointment on the shield. So when you play that back, if you're hitting a boss or if you're mobbing, you can spam 3 off real quickly, but you can also time it every 5 seconds. So you can fire rack, wait 5, fire rack. So you've got 15 seconds of immunity. And by that time, you've probably got another charge back. So let's say that's 20 seconds of immunity. So you can control when you're immune as you're going through the level and traversing. So you never have to worry about survivability. That being said, let's say they did take your shield. Let's give you another 5 seconds of immunity as well on top of that. So you've got a lot of time where the enemies can't actually hurt you. And then on an artifact, my personal choice is the last stand white elephant. So let's give you another 5 seconds of immunity every time you get down to lower than 50%. So there is a ton. If you're a solo player, which is what the rack attack is kind of built around, if you want survivability, you won't get much more than this. And then on top of that, just remember that every time you're hitting somebody with a critical hit with Megavore, you're recharging your shield as well.
Yeah.
So you've got a ton of survivability on Flak now. You can never be said that Flak doesn't have survivability.
Finally.
He definitely does. He definitely does. And then it's my favorite thing from DLC4. It's the Flak class mod, the Peregrine. So as we said before, whenever Flak's rack hits an enemy, they drop a grenade. In this instance, we're going to be dropping the Fish Slap grenade, which the passives that I have on my Calm are splash damage, which is the white elephant portion of our build, the melee damage, which is the Fish Slap element of our build, and the action skill damage, which is the rack element of our build. So every time we fire a rack forward, we're getting that triple damage off all of them. And then if I was to choose point distribution on it, I would just want as many points into Interplanetary Stalker as I could. So I couldn't turn away these 3 passives because they're just perfect, but more points in Interplanetary Stalker would be where I would go.
Oh, this is a lot. This is a lot. Okay.
Yeah. And then obviously the last thing I would do is the actual Fish Slap itself. So it was a cartel event thing, so you can't actually get a new one anymore. It is better to have a ASE of any element than it is to on grenade thrown. Now, I know that doesn't necessarily make sense when you think about it. You're like, well, I throw it and I get 25% damage. But ASE starts on Flak as soon as the rack's actually left his hand. So that rack in the air has already got ASE before it's landed. So we get an extra 50% damage rather than 25% damage on grenade thrown. So that's where we get tons and tons of damage from.
Interesting. Okay, so we talked about the rack attack build. What about gear for the co-op build?
So the co-op build, I would still recommend the stopgap. However, there is an alternative, which is the version 0.m. Now, this shield can only drop from the Maliwan Takedown, but there are other shields like it that amp your damage on a full shield. So bearing in mind what we said earlier about we're always going to be topping up our shield all the time, which means we're always going to be getting the amp damage all the time. So if you hold the light show on a single target enemy, every 2 or 3 seconds, you're going to get an amped damage pellet of all 5 pellets go through. So it's a really cool little concept where, and this is really only really unique to Flak, where you can just hold the trigger down on a Monarch or a light show, and just every 3 seconds, you're just going to get that extra amp damage for absolute for free. So you would lose potentially a little bit of survivability in terms of the immunity phase, but you also still are going to have a lot of survivability from the fact that when you're using the purple tree and the gravity snare, nobody's going to shoot at you. So it's kind of pros and cons on, do you want the immunity instantaneously, or do you want to just know the fact that all the allies are currently looking at each other thinking they should be shooting at each other?
Does it work on bosses too? Can you make a boss an ally?
No. So you can't make the Valkyries or Wotan or what a traditional bash like Tron. You can't make any of those actually work for you. But if you were to put it around the Valkyries, all those ads will shoot at the Valkyries for you.
Cool.
In terms of class mods, so I chose either a Cosmic Stalker or a Bounty Hunter here. So a Cosmic Stalker most of the time because I had decent passives on it. But you could kind of, it doesn't matter as long as I would say you choose one of the two. It's just kind of for personal preference. You don't need to use a red fang because you're already got enough distraction with the purple tree anyway. So Cosmic Stalker just for just that extra damage would be my preference. And then in terms of artifact, I would definitely say the Pearl, because you're going to be reliant on charging your own damage up. So the Pearl will give you tons of damage, and we're going to be using consecutive hits on all our weapons. If you can get it, consecutive hits is the one to get on a Reflux, on a Monarch, on a Light Show, on a Flipper. Consecutive hits is how you go when you're on the purple side of things. Even on your Plague Bearer, consecutive hits is where you go. So we've got our Pearl, we've got our Bounty Hunter or our Cosmic Stalker. We have a Stopgap or a version 0.M. And then for Grenade, you can use kind of what you want. So something with recurring into it, like a tracker, like a hex or something like that. And then on Grenade Thrown for the purple tree. So ASCs aren't very effective on Gravity Snare because it lasts for so long. So you're not using your action skill regularly enough to gain from the ASCs. But with your loader bot firing grenades and you periodically throwing some grenades, you're going to get on grenade throw more regularly. So I definitely recommend that.
Fantastic. We're talking about anointments already. You mentioned the consecutive hits. You mentioned the 390. What other anointments should players aim for?
So if you made some different choices with shields, you could open yourself up. So we talked earlier about the capstone for the purple tree being double your shield. So if you went deathless, for example, just to get 200,000 shield, for example, then Deathless would open you up to URAD, so while under 50% health, do an extra 150% radiation damage. Or you could use a front loader shield to lower your health. Just bearing in mind, if you do that, then obviously you have no health gate. So if you do get like one shot at certain points, you will just go into fight for your life. And we don't have lick the wounds, so you have to get yourself up, and your pet can't revive you.
Oh, interesting. That's hard. That's what I kind of rely on my pet to pick me up. I guess if you're not squishy, it doesn't really matter though.
No, I mean, I didn't go into fight for your life once when I did the whole of the Guardian True Takedown. So you should be okay.
Cool. What gear, if anything, would you consider essential?
So if you're going to use the rack build, you're going to need to have the Peregrine from DLC 4. Okay. If you don't have that and you use like a Bounty Hunter, you're still going to do decent damage with your racks, but you're not going to have anything really for the melee. So I'd recommend, you don't need your fish slap on. So you can just change that to pretty much how the purple tree is set up. So your consecutive hits, your on grenade thrown. So if you don't have the Peregrine, then definitely change out and just run what we said for the purple tree.
And where do you get the Peregrine?
So the Peregrine can drop from any named boss in DLC 4, okay. But Blisters and the Caretaker have an increased chance to drop these in the DLC 4 areas. And if you don't know who they are the two longest side missions in DLC 4.
Fantastic. Thank you. Are there any specific roles that you consider ideal as class-specific passives on the mod?
So for the Peregrine, melee damage, splash damage, action skill damage is the perfect set of passives for that. Then on a Cosmic Stalker, you're just looking for the usual suspects. If you like the Hellwalker, which has been recently buffed, then shotgun damage, just weapon damage will do as well. I like pistol damage for the Light Show because the Light Show is kind of a go-to for me. But it's just all about damage. The purple tree is in such a way that you don't really have to worry about survivability at all. So you could maybe take magazine size. That might be a good option as well. But you definitely don't need shield capacity or anything like that on the comms.
Can you talk about artifacts for a moment?
Yes. So for the Peregrine build, anything with White Elephant. So I have Last Stand for that extra bit of immunity. I'm going to be honest with you, with that much immunity, you probably don't need Last Stand. So you could put a stone on there, for example, like a Cryo Stone, which would turn your Face Puncher and your Fish Slap to Cryo, for example. Or you could use a Snowdrift just for maneuverability. So the prefix, if you kind of don't need that much Last Stand. I just have it on there. So when I built the build, I was like, I want as much survivability as I can when I want on rack. So that's why we chose Last Stand. But you could use a Snowdrift if you just wanted to get around there. And then for the purple tree, I think the Pearl's just the best option all round, unless you want to do things that are really silly with your shield and make it go to just, you want to try and get as much shield as you can, then you can use a Deathless, or even the Lunacy from DLC 2 will give you double the amount of shield. So you can take those options as well. But if you're asking me the best in slot, a White Elephant for the rack build and Pearl for the purple Gravity Snare.
And where can we get the Pearl?
The Pearl is also from DLC 2, from a quest reward.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah. What grenade mod did you say you use? You said the Fish Slap for the rack attack build?
Yeah, so Fish Slap for the rack attack build, and then you can kind of use what you want. As long as I'd recommend the anointment more than the grenade. So on grenade thrown is where I would go, and something that hits nice like a CMT, multiple hits, or a hex, that kind of thing.
That's a cloning maddening tracker for those of you who don't know.
Yes.
CMTs.
Apologies.
No worries. And let's talk shields.
Yes. So as I said, the stopgap is my number one recommended action skill stopgap for the flak, because you're just going to get immunity all the time on the rack build. And then I would probably still keep the stopgap on Gravity Snare. But if you want to do that amp damage every 3 or 4 seconds, then the version 0.m. If you can't do the Malawan takedown for whatever reason, then another good option is the recharger. It's a world drop, and the recharger will instantly give you your shield back straight away when it actually depletes, and that resets after 20 seconds. So you're probably going to be really safe with that bet, because you're always going to be topping up your shield anyway, and it's only an off chance that your shield will actually deplete. And then if that off chance happens, then you go back up. The chances of you losing 2 shields within the space of 20 seconds with this build is very slim.
Understandable. Okay. Will this build work if you don't have the proper weapons or gear yet?
So Gravity Snare, in terms of its tree and the way that it's spec'd, will definitely work without gear. So the only time it won't work without gear, well, not that it won't work without gear, the only time it won't be as efficient is if you don't have the synergies with damage on your passive, so your calm, or the right anointments on your weapons. The right gear will not affect how much you can turn those guys to allies, or how much you can bump them up into the air. Because this ability doesn't do damage. It's not like you need action skill damage on your calm or anything like that. You literally will immobilize the enemies. So as long as you're making that, kind of power ladder of getting the better annoyance and getting the better guns, you'll be absolutely fine. Fantastic.
What would you say that I could use until I have optimal loot? Like a 390 or something?
So for the rack side of things, for bossing and for solo play, anything with 300 over 90 that packs a decent punch. You could even use a light show with 300 over 90 if you wanted to. It's not the optimum anointment for the light show, but the light show still has enough damage for you to cope with that. And you still get the huge amounts of damage from the White Elephant with the 300% over 90 anointment. Otherwise, you could pretty much use what you want. Just bearing in mind, if you don't have the White Elephant, you're still going to get millions of damage through the Fish Slap. You're just not going to get that delayed explosion that looks cool when you walk away.
Fair. We do like those crazy big explosions. What Guardian rank talent should players focus on to get the most bonus stats for this build?
100% Groundbreaker. I feel like every time I'm asked that, Groundbreaker is the one that you need. So it's just free damage. It's simple as that. It's just free damage. So especially with the Peregrine build on the rack side of things, 100%. There are some nice things obviously in there as well. The being able to have your guns instantly reloaded when you're going to fight for your life is a nice one, but it's all about Groundbreaker at this point.
Fair. A lot of people say that. I like that. What Guardian rank talents, if any, should a player disable to use this build?
There are no known issues with this build in terms of Guardian rank, so keep them all on and have fun.
Okay. When spending a Guardian token, what are the stats players should focus on spending their tokens on to obtain maximum min-max potential?
So I would just say just keep it an even keel. So you're going to be able to do, like, you're going to be disabling enemies, so you want kind of an even distribution. If you wanted to and you were in love with the rack side of things, you could start putting points into the melee damage. But bearing in mind, we're also doing a lot of melee damage already with M10 scaling, so you really aren't going to need it. But if you wanted to, you could do that. Are there any Mayhem modifiers that one should keep an eye out for that will enhance this build? So normally there are certain modifiers that you would avoid, like post-mortem is a pain. However, with the delayed fuse on the white elephant, that actually deletes post-mortem. So where you would probably see post-mortem proccing like every, I don't know, 5 to 10 seconds and they really become a pain, most of them are actually killed with the rack section of the build. So if you're running the rack, you can run post-mortem. Ticked off doesn't matter because we're not doing elemental damage. I tend to run Healy Avenger because I'll just shoot them out of the sky before they do any real problems. And then the first one, kind of your choice really, whether you want a Galaxy Brain or Speed Demon. I like Speed Demon because Flak's not very fast on his own. So, right. And then for Gravity Snare, probably the first three again, what you want in the first one, Healy Avenger and Ticked Off. And then you've just got to make a choice. So we're not actually using much elemental damage at all, really, just our pet with a little bit of a smidge. So I actually run Dazed and Infused. So although it makes quite a lot of pretty colors across the map, we're not doing anything because we're using kinetic damage. So we'll just chew through that anyway. The only time that becomes complicated, sometimes we'll use the reflux, which is corrosive. But if you just switch away from that, you'll be fine.
Cool. How did you test this build?
So we did True Takedown on the Malawan Takedown and Guardian Takedown, and it walked through it. Like I said, varying the build. So I was solo, so I varied the builds. On the crystals, I used the purple side just to make the crystals nice and easy. And then for the bossing, I used the rack side of it. So it just depends what you want. And you can even use the rack side all the way through. You can use the gravity all the way through if you wanted to. You've got more than enough damage in your weapons if you've got the right gear set to do damage to bosses. And what the gravity snare will allow you to do, if you just put it under the boss, if they have any adds around them, like for example on Wotan, it will just disable those. Even the kind of death spheres that are high up, even though they're far away from the ground, they will still be disabled.
Oh, that's cool. What were some of your initial impressions when you tested this build?
So I actually was really surprised how big the radius was. So we are increasing the radius, but I was just surprised how wide it will be. So like I said, it covers like the width of Athenas, or if you put it on the Valkyrie platform, it will cover like the whole platform. So any of those, I think there's 3 spawn areas on there. They will just become either an ally or whatever you've used. And the advantage of that is when the Valkyrie actually comes onto that platform, if they are allies, they'll all start shooting it for you. So you got your little army going.
That's fantastic. I can't wait to see this. What do the numbers look like compared to similar builds, both ones you've crafted and ones you've seen other community members display?
So we don't hit damage cap. Okay. We definitely don't hit damage cap, but this is the most powerful rack build that I've ever seen. It's very hard to compare the gravity snare because that doesn't actually do damage. That's for crowd control. That's for co-op. But in terms of the rack element side of things, expect to see 800 millions, 200 millions, 400 millions on someone like Tron. You'll one-shot Tron easily without a shadow of doubt.
Oh, I can't wait. Strong Flak. Do you feel there are any changes that Gearbox could make to the game that would further refine this build without making it drastically over or underpowered?
So I think, because I've only had it a couple of days, it's going to be difficult for me to answer that. What I will say is on first impressions, giving Flak so much survivability on someone that's supposed to be a glass cannon, it'll be interesting to see whether Flak now just rises to the top and stays there, because you do have access to so much survivability now that if it's played with maybe some synergies that I haven't discovered yet, then you could just be unstoppable.
Fantastic. I can't wait. Oh, we're at the end again. Thank you so much for being here, Triple. This has been amazing. I can't wait to see what you do with your terror builds and the purple tree.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
I can't wait. Is there a build that you can maybe take a couple of seconds to tease for your next appearance?
So I do have a certain Zane build that focuses on the new purple tree, but that's all I'm allowed to say. But it's called Shoulder of Fortune, and that's all you get.
Oh, we get a name. Okay, yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much. I can't wait to hear more about it. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you so much, Triple, for being here as well. Where can we find you on the internet, Triple G?
So on Twitch, it's Triple GZ. On YouTube, it's just Triple G. And if you want me on Twitter, it's GZ1.
Fantastic. Well, the pull of Gravity Flag is too great to resist in both ways you can play them, and fans of the Beastmaster will not be disappointed when they're finally able to take it for a spin. I can think of no better way to show our appreciation for Triple G's efforts to bring us this unique and powerful build than to once again dub him an ultimate Vault Hunter.
Thank you very much.
The much discussed fourth skill trees will be out soon. Gravity Flak clearly will set the standard for purple tree based flak builds going forward, but let us know what you think of it via your favorite social media platform. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 days on Thursday, October 22nd, where Moxie will rejoin the program and showcase another fourth skill tree based build on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and SoundCloud at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific. If you'd like more details about this build, you can find a link to more information and the build in the podcast description section. Happy looting to all you Ultimate Vault Hunters out there.